So, welcome everybody. We are with 6 person. Welcome Farida, Robbe, Frederik. Very enjoyed this. The aim of this discussion is to learn from Professor Löhr. We are very glad that he has found time to deal with us, his experience. I can name Professor Löhr an academic friend of the Ghent referendum movement and of the Constitution patriots. We can say that they fund affordable housing, our public assets, our fundamental rights, and our constitution for the general interest in this strange and difficult times. So I give the word. Professor Löhr had not so much time for a personal reason. Dus he gave his PowerPoint. We can debate. When this debate is finished, he can leave, no problem. And then I propose that we, in Dutch, can continue about the last page of his PowerPoint. That is the 3 suggestions he has given about how to struggle against speculation, link it to the austerity plan of the city of Ghent and other public authorities actually which privatize and which organize cuts in public budget. So I give the word to Professor Löhr.
Okay, many thanks, Ralf Verbeke. It is not a matter of time. Yesterday I got a flu vaccination. I take it because I always meet many people, students and so on, and I don't want to get a flu. And I didn't tolerate it very well. So I have a headache and so on. And that's why I can get up for 2 hours and then I need some rest and some nap. I ask for your apologies. So I am trying to find my presentation now and to share it. No, it does not work. One moment. Before we tested and then it worked, but now it does not work.
So you click on the row underneath.
Yes, I do, but nothing happens.
Share screen, and then you.
And nothing happens.
Good Freda, Elias?
If it doesn't work, I can share my screen.
I added something on the slides. I would prefer.
We tested it like 20 minutes ago. Then it worked, but
yeah, but now something is wrong. Huh? I have no idea what it is. Huh? Maybe I'm going out and coming again. One moment, please.
Okay,
huh?
no problem.
Oké. Ja, dat is altijd iets met internetverbindingen. Hè? Dat is raar. Hè? Er is altijd iets.
We hebben het daarnet getest en toen ging het, maar ja.
Tja. Welkom Frederik, welkom.
Ja, dag Raf,
Ja.
iedereen.
Ja.
Ja.
Dus ja, we zijn met niet veel. Rob Frederik is bio-ingenieur en eigenlijk ook bezig met landbouw. En Frederik Robbe is iemand... Ja, oké.
I hope it works now. Do you hear me?
We can see it.
Oké.
And you also can hear me, yeah?
Yes.
Oké.
Very well. Huh? Okay. Here, land rent and speculation. This was my task. Here you find this interesting citation of John Stuart Mill. He was the father of the liberalism, founding father, and he was very critical about private property in land. This is very interesting because modern liberals, for them, private property and land, it's holy. For the father, it was not holy. Yeah? So this is what I want to talk about you, some theory about land rent, of land rent. The Henry George theorem, which also might be quite interesting in your case, considering the budget situation of rent and then land rent and speculation, and in the end, some measures against speculation. So let's start with some theory of rent. In the modern legal theory, often the property rights, also property rights in land, they are considered as a bundle of rights. It is some rights concerning economic value, some rights concerning control of the assets. For instance, you have the right to sell the economic asset and to reap the value. This is called ius abutendi. You have the right to take the fruits. This is usus fructus in Latin. You have the right to alter or destroy the economic asset. This is abusus, and the right of use. This is usus. And in our legal order, almost all rights are bundled. We have right now in property of land, we have one exception. This is the abusus right, because this is quite diluted by public law. For instance, you have some law that in some quarter only residential housing dwelling is allowed, but you're not allowed to make a shooting range or to breed pigs and so on. This is quite natural, of course, because you want to avoid so-called external costs, impacts on the neighbors and so on. For this, we have the construction regulation, the construction law. So for us, quite interesting is this economic value stuff, the right to enjoy the fruits and the right to sell the economic asset. And here we are directly within the land rents or ground rents. So what are ground rents? You find this already at the physiocrates. These were the old French economists. Also, Adam Smith learned from them, from the physiocrates, and already Adam Smith, he was talking about land rent, and he also thought that taxing land rents is probably a very good idea. He couldn't be so clear on this issue because he himself got some stipends from noblemen, and so he couldn't criticize too loud in order not to get taken away the money. Even more important were almost at the same time Johann Heinrich von Thünen, a German, and David Ricardo, the Englishman, who was at that time the most rich citizen of whole England, was Jewish Portuguese, and he made a bet on the result of the Battle of Waterloo, and he was right. And then he got a very big fortune, and he could dedicate himself to economics. And these two guys, they developed and they interpreted land rents as differential rents. What does it mean? Here in this slide, you see on the left hand, a city with a marketplace. So when you want to breed potatoes, the question is, where do you start to breed them? If it is possible, of course, as close to the marketplace as possible. Why? The transportation costs are the lowest. Only if all the acres are already occupied, you're going further outside, and then the transportation costs get higher. If these acres are fully used, if there's no capacity free anymore, you're going even more outside, and so on. This cost curve is almost the same as the supply curve for potatoes. And if you have a certain demand, you find a certain potato price here. And this potato price is the same, no matter if the potato is breeded close to the city or far away from the city. And the difference between the potato price and the costs, which are particularly transport costs, this is the so-called land rent. You have the same, for instance, also for oil, you have the same for water, you have the same for a lot of cases. This is almost a universal law. Even for electricity, you have the same for the power plants. But here it's of particular importance. This means if the farmers have the same, put in the same labor in a preferable site close to the city, and in a site far away from the city, the farmer which is located close to the city center, he can earn much more money, even the price is the same because his costs are lower. And these are the differential rents. These differential rents originally have been developed, the concept has been developed. There's somebody in the background.
Yeah, it's rough. I will tell him I'm in the same building, so I will tell him he's talking to someone. I will tell him to put his sound on.
Or simply switch off the the micro, maybe.
I muted Raf.
Okay, thank you. Okay, where have I been? Here you have the land rent, and this land rent stuff. This has been developed first for agricultural sites, not for city sites. Later on, even for Thunen and also Ricardo, they had the idea to transfer this idea also to city sites. I come to that point later on. Originally, it was only for agricultural land, later on transferred to urban land. And what I showed you before, this is the land rent due to differences in location. But there's also land rent due to differences in quality. If you have a very good soil in agriculture, it is, of course, you have, of course, the possibility to earn more money than you have poor soil. Also for urban land, this holds. If you have the possibility to put a residential house there, you can earn different money and safer money as if you have office building or something. And also the intensity of use plays a certain role. For instance, if you have sites close to another, you can make more efficient agriculture than you have splitted up sites, or if you have the possibility to set up a skyscraper, you can earn more money as if you only are allowed to make some one-floor buildings, some bungalows, and so on. No? All these things, quality and also intensity of use. It's also quite interesting that this stuff also has been developed by theorists as Marx and also Kautsky. Kautsky was very he looked particularly on the agricultural land, but also Marx, he developed this theory a lot. And later also Oppenheimer had the same idea as Marx and Kautsky. They said this is not all. There's also something as an absolute rent. And this absolute rent, Marx said, this is because of the power landowner has. I don't know if this explanation is really good. And you see in this formula down, you see some question marks because this means that in this formula something is missing, and this is what all these theories could have identified for this absolute rent. But I will tell you another explanation for this absolute rent later on. So far, the value of the land is the land rent, what you get, the advantage you have compared with the marginal rent, divided with the discount rate. This means if the discount rate is falling, if the central bank, for instance, lowers the interest rates, then you may expect that the value of land is rising. And by the way, you also may expect that the land rent is rising. Why this is the case, I will try to explain you later on. The land rent is not absolute. The land rent changes according to the policy of the central bank and also other effects such as taxation and so on. About this, I will talk later on now. Von Thünen, he had a very interesting theory which he developed first on agricultural fruits. He said that inside or close to the center here, you will see that the most valuable fruits are breeded. If you are going outside, the less valuable vegetables are breeded, and then the least valuable vegetables are breeded here. Yeah? And this is a similar thing as you see also when you're looking urban land. When you're looking at the urban land, you find here in the center the skyscrapers. Here is the land rent. The land rent is the highest. If you are going outside to the periphery, the land rent will decrease, and this is this gradient which you see in the von Thünen theory he had. And this is valid for agricultural land as well as for urban land. That this is not only a fever dream, that this is real. You see, for instance, here in this picture, this an American valuer gave me once. This is from Johannesburg in South Africa, and this doesn't show the buildings. This is a map of the land values, and you see very clearly how this corresponds with this theoretical expectation that there's a gradient, and the gradient, the land values, they're the highest in the city center, and they get lower to the periphery. And you see somewhere here to the left, there's also some higher land value, and I'm quite sure, I don't know Johannesburg, but I'm quite sure that there's a metro line or something like that, that here is also a lot of settlement, which is in fact a short way to the city because you can get inside with very few time of commuting. What I told you right now, this rent theory, this is a fractional thing. This means it holds true on different levels. It holds true on the municipality level inside the cities, as I showed you before in South Africa. It holds true in regional level. There are some centers and some peripheral regions. By the way, you always have to watch on this stuff from a functional point of view and not from a geographical point of view. For instance, in Rhineland-Palatinate, which is also a neighbor of Belgium, our state Rhineland-Palatinate, the powerful regions, the economic centers, they are at the bottom. In the center, there's nothing. So we would say the economic center is at the bottom and not in the geographic center. It is always about the functional center. Then you have the same in the national dimension. For instance, you have big cities as Brussels and so on. This is a center. We have Munich, we have, for instance, Hamburg. Berlin is a special case because this is made politically. It was not very strong from an economical point of view. And also supranational, we also have some centers. No? In former times, we are talking about the blue banana from London up to the Ruhr area, also Belgium, and down to northern Italy. Now we are talking about the star, which also includes Paris and also includes Warsaw. But it's also the same. We have center and we have periphery, and in the center we have much higher values than in the periphery. Now, what I told you before, I want to tell you that the land rent is not an absolute thing, but it is relative and depends on other things. For instance, if you see the center, the functional center here left, then you see in the functional center we can get a high income. In the functional periphery, we can only produce a low income. Why? In the center, the productivity of goods and services is much higher. For instance, when you are in Brussels or wherever, or for instance in Munich or Frankfurt, you will see there are a lot of high productive services. A service industry very productive. For instance, there are lawyers, there are consulting companies, there are banks, and so on. And they create a lot of value. In contrast, when you're going to the periphery, you also will find services, but this is the nail studio, not more. You don't find a lot of banks. You don't find a lot of lawyers. You don't find a lot of consulting companies when you're in the middle of nowhere in a village where fox and rabbit says goodnight to each other. You know? But on the other hand, you have to pay out of the income, you have to pay the costs for the mobile factors of production, which is labor, which is capital. Labor, you have to pay wages. These wages, they have a tendency to equalize from the center to the periphery, even at least in the long run, and with comparable qualification. Of course, in the center, you have a demand for higher qualified labor, and the labor market is in a higher tension. This is why I painted this here. It is not a flat line, but also the labor costs, they increase the more you approach to the center. Capital, this is not the case. Capital is very homogeneous. If, for instance, in the periphery, the interest rate is rising, immediately capital flows out and makes the same level of the interest rate. This is all the same. So if you deduct from the income the costs of the mobile factors of production, the rest is, this is the marginal rent. I will tell something later about that. This is the land rent. Yeah? The land rent is the highest in the center and is the lowest here in the periphery. At the point where the land rent gets close to zero, we are talking about the marginal land. It doesn't make sense to go beyond the margin, because beyond the margin, the costs of labor and capital would be higher than what you can earn. You know? So you stop here. This is the marginal land. This is the point up to where economizing is possible.
Ja, kijk, hij is bezig. Ja. Hij is bezig met een show.
Robin?
Hallo? Ja, hoort je mij?
Kunt u geluid op stil zetten, alsjeblieft?
Ja, ik ben aan het zoeken waar geluid op stil. Ogenblikje.
Thank you. Okay, so what happens, for instance, if something changes? For instance, we have a price shock. The oil prices are rising, or the gas prices are rising, or the taxes are rising. Huh? Then the costs of labor, capital, everything is rising. For instance, the taxes are rising. Let's say the taxes are rising, the tax on labor is rising, then the costs of labor is also rising. What happens now? The point where you just can pay the factors of production, this is not here anymore at ML0, this is now here, which means the periphery is strangulated. The periphery is made dead. And the only thing you can do against that is with fiscal measures to subsidize them, but you need more taxes in order to subsidize them, and then you even make the problem worse in the end. But it means you have a lower point where economizing is still feasible. And also the land rent, I go back. No. The land rent before was this year, all over these mobile factors of production. I don't know if you see my mouse. I try to show this. The land rent was this very big.
No, we cannot see your mouse.
You cannot see my mouse.
No.
Okay. This is about labor and capital, about these horizontal lines to income. This all is land rent, and this land rent now will get much lower when you make high taxes, or when you have other cost components like energy prices and so on, which make the costs higher. Much lower, which means, I think in Belgium it's similar. In Belgium you have very high taxes. In Germany we also have very high taxes. I already know the situation in Germany. I also investigated about it. I made research about it. Normally all the infrastructure of Europe is concentrating in Germany. Normally we should have very high land prices. We don't have very high land prices, in fact. Why? Because we have high contributions, we have high taxes, we have high social contributions. And this means people don't have money anymore to pay. The ability to pay for rent is low because a lot of money is taken away from the people, and this makes the land rent comparatively low. For instance, if you're looking to Berlin, Berlin is, compared to other European countries, a very cheap capital. Although people always complain, they complain relative to their income. Of course, it's expensive relative to the income, but compared to other capitals, it is not expensive. This is the point. Okay, now Henry George's theorem. I told you already that tax is a problem, and let's have a look who is paying the taxes. We have the value-added tax. This is borne by the consumers. We have the income tax. This is particularly borne by the employees. Also, companies bear a certain share, but it's the minor share. The lion's share of the income tax is borne by the employees. In Germany, the tax on labor is the same as the VAT. But additionally, in Germany at least, but also in other countries, we have the social contributions. And this means the two groups, consumers, employees, and they are bearing the lion's share of all taxation. Also, the other taxes, like in Germany, we have beer tax, we have insurance tax. These are, to the highest degree, also consumers who are bearing this. So we have to keep in mind, we have two cows which the milk is taken off. These are the consumers and these are the employees. And these two groups, they are also to a high share the same. They cover to a high share. Most consumers are also employees, and most employees are, even more employees are also consumers. So what happens now if we have the employees, we have the consumers, they are paying. By the way, most of them are also tenants, because in the big cities we have, I guess in Belgium it's the same, we have a high rate of tenants. In Berlin, for instance, we have 80% tenants and only 20% owners of real estate. In Munich, it's the same. We have 70% tenants. We have 30% owners of real estate. I think in every big city, it is, at least in the Middle European country where the rental market works, it is the same picture. In Italy, not, because this is a different story historically. They destroyed the rental market, but where a rental market exists, you have tenants in the big cities which have the highest share of the flats. So what happens? The employees and the consumers, they're paying taxes. What happens with these taxes? If the state doesn't make nonsense, and by the way, he makes a lot of nonsense, they spend it for public services, and they put the land into value. They valorize the land. This, for instance, is a picture of Frankfurt. But what is Frankfurt? Frankfurt has an airport, an international. Frankfurt is a railway cross. Frankfurt is a cross of highways. Frankfurt has a famous university. They have very good hospitals, and so on and so on. This is all infrastructure which, to a high degree, is paid from the taxpayer, and with public infrastructure. Without all this, Frankfurt would be a village. It would not be of importance. Only because of this, it is of importance. And this means the value of the land is created by public money, by public means. And this means the taxpayer pays the valorization of the land. If the valorization of the land is successful, the same people who paid here the taxes also have to pay higher rents. So they have to pay double. And this is also a sort of, you may say, of exploitation of these groups. Who doesn't pay, who is the big winner, is the landowner. He can go to bed and sleep, wake up the next day and feeling richer if everything works well. And this, by the way, has also nothing to do with market economy. Market economy means those who take the benefits also have to bear the costs, and the other way around. Here, some guys are taking the costs, but other guys take the benefits. This is not the idea. This is not at all the idea of market economy. And by the way, it's also quite interesting that some founders of market economy, I said already John Stuart Mill, but there were also others like Johann Heinrich Gossen or like Walras, very famous guys, from microeconomics, if you're an economist. But what people didn't know is that there were land socialists. They said, we want to have the land socialized. Because here the market doesn't work. And now, next thing, the Henry George theorem, and this might be also interesting on the background of your proposal for Gent, how to create public money. What does it mean? You see this table on the left, in the left row, you see national income, the composition of national income. You have private good and services, and you have public goods, the fixed costs. I forgot to write the ED, fixed costs. And in the middle, you have the distribution of the national income. It is distributed for the factors of production, labor, capital, and rents. The labor gets wages, capital gets interest, the land gets rent. So what is the idea of the Henry George theorem? It is mentioned according to Henry George, the guy you see on the photo left down. American land reformer, he didn't elaborate this Henry George theorem. It was elaborated later on by the other guys, particularly by the right guy. This is Joseph Stiglitz, and also many others in the 70s of the last century. There's a lot of mathematics behind and so on. I don't want to bother with that. I want to give you the essence in a nutshell. The essence in a nutshell is that public goods such as bridges, such as traffic hubs, like stations, like highway crosses, such things as schools, hospitals, universities, they create land rents. But the point is, this land rents, and this is the clue, the land rents themselves would be enough to pay the fixed costs of the public goods. And this you have to keep in mind. Simply, the land rents would be enough. There are no taxes necessary. Without taxes, the land rents would be completely enough. But we don't try to tape them. What are we doing instead? We have private property in land, and so we give the land rents, the highest degree of the highest share of land rents, we are giving to the privates. The land rent is privatized instead of putting it into public goods. But somehow the state has to be financed. So how to do that? Yeah, by the conventional taxation. We are taking away, we are milking labor. Labor has the biggest share beside consumption. And we are also milking a little bit the factor capital, but not too much. Otherwise, the factor capital is in Switzerland or in Luxembourg. Only a little bit, please. And land, yeah, only homeopathic. Although land could be taped, because land cannot run away. You can tax it, it cannot escape. Unlike capital, capital can escape. Nonetheless, we are taking the money from the mobile factors of production who also can try to escape taxation because they are mobile. What's the result? The result is conventional, not conventional taxation. We are, there's still a German word, we are privatizing commonly created values. These are the land rents. We don't use them for public investments, but we are, we don't use the land rents for we don't give it to the public. We are giving it to privates, although the public created the land rents. Instead, we are socializing privately created values. We tear this Henry George theorem apart. And what's the result? The result is the costs are increasing. For instance, the cost of labor by labor taxation. The available income is decreasing. For instance, value-added tax or other taxation of consumption. And this means the social surplus, as which the land rents also can be interpreted, is also decreasing. And this is why, for instance, such a state as Germany, but I guess in Belgium it is almost the same. In Belgium you have a very dense settlement, you have a very high taxation, and normally the land price, the land rents also should be higher. This is the result in the end. So you may say private property in land and the tax state as we have it today, these are the same. This is the flip coin of the same phenomenon. Private property of land, the flip coin is the tax state. So now I want to tell you something about land rent and speculation. So everybody is talking about speculation, but if you ask what exactly is speculation, very often you don't get a satisfying answer. For instance, the site which some private person holds for his kids or his grandchildren and so on, is this speculation? What about the site a company holds and the company owner says, I need it for storing material? Is this speculation or what is it? Or I need it for maybe to extend it later. Is it speculation or not? I think a very good economic concept, at least, in order to analyze the phenomenon of speculation, is the so-called real option approach. Let's go to the lower part of the picture. Here you see a house on a site, yeah? And you see different scenarios. There's insecurity, and the owner of the site, when he buys the house, he doesn't know which scenario takes part. C1, C2, C3, this is all some net present value he can earn with the scenario. Let's say C1 is 100, a very positive scenario, and his subjective probabilities, his personal estimation for the probability is 20%. Then let's say a middle real case is maybe 70, and the probability he gives it is 40%. But there's also the probability of 40% that the investment completely fails. So what would you do? You would make an expectation value. You would say, okay, I take the 100, take it time 20%, plus the 70 times 40% plus minus the 100 times 40%. This is 8. Yeah? With other words, this investment is insecure. You expect a positive come out of 8 units. Excuse me. Something in my neck. My voice is a bit disturbed. So let's imagine. Let's imagine you have a second strategy. This is the investment strategy A. You're first buying a site, and you are not doing the follow-up investment. With the site, you have the follow-up investment, the building. You are sure you can do it. The location is safe for you. You have the site, you have the right to build a building on later, to erect a building later. If there's insecurity, you simply can wait until the insecurity is over. And if you see, okay, there's a very poor development, the government, they're only idiots, the situation is going to the basement, everything is going bad, what will you do? You don't make the follow-up investment, you don't erect the building. This means in the first scenario here in investment strategy B, you had possible was negative present value of 100 with a probability of 40%. This you will not suffer if you have such a successive investment strategy. Why? Because if you see that everything goes down, you have not that much capital invested. You simply cut off the negative branch, and the capital value will be 0 and not minus 100. This means that you only can make the positive value if, against your expectations, the situation turns to good, the government changes, and all the economy clears up and so on. Then you invest. But when you are seeing it goes down, then you don't invest. This you can't make in the former strategy. Here you have invested everything, and then you only can pray. You cannot react anymore. In the other strategy, when you have a sequential investment, first you have the site, then you are waiting what happens in security, and then you decide what you are doing. And such an option to be able to wait and to react, this has an own value. This is the value of being able to wait, and this is the so-called option value. I make it purposely very short. I could talk much about this. But what I want to say is that this stuff, this upper strategy is much more valuable than the lower strategy. This means, from an individual point of view, it makes a lot of sense, first, to hold the ground and maybe not to put a house on it, and then first waiting. How does everything develop? But the point is if everything or if many people are doing like that, then of course we have a problem, because there are not enough houses, there are not enough tax income, there's not enough jobs, and so on. What is reasonable from an individual strategy turns to be bad from the standpoint of the society as a whole. Here again, the saw that you are able to cut the negative branches. Another point, which is very connected to what I told you before, we have a gap between supply and demand because of this possibility to wait. Why? Think about, how does an investor calculate? An investor who wants to make a project, he first calculates the discounted cash flow, which he can make with the project. In this case, the discounted cash flow is assumed with 1 million euro. Then he takes away the construction costs and also the imputed profits. In the construction costs also included some costs for financing and so on. After he subtracts from the discounted cash flows the costs of construction, 800,000, the imputed profit, 100,000, there's only 100,000 left. And this 100,000 he's able to pay for the land. But the owner of the land, he says, I don't want simply to be compensated from the land rent I cannot take anymore. I also want to be compensated for this loss of option value, which I also give you. And by the way, which is completely worthless for an investor who wants to invest. This option value is only valuable for an investor who does not want to invest and wants to wait. But if you want to invest, you have to pay for something which is without value for you. So if the seller of the site says, I don't want only this, I want not only to have this 100,000, which you can offer me, I want to have 50,000 more or 100,000 more or even more, because I don't lose simply the land rents, I also lose the flexibility. I want to be compensated for both. Then you have a problem. Then either the investor has to increase the rents in order to earn more than 1 million, or he has to decrease the construction costs, make a very low quality, in order to be able to meet the requirements of the land seller, or the deal doesn't take part. This is also a possibility. This means the market fails. It doesn't work because of this optional characteristics of the market. By the way, this has nothing to do with greed. Often it is insinuated that the owners of the land, they are greedy people, and so no, it's a very rational calculus. Yeah, and another thing, also quite interesting, this is the same I told you before. In the center of a city, you have the possibility to get high yields. In the margin of a city, the yields will be low. This is the slope downward. When you look down, you see the construction costs, interest, and imputed profits. When you are putting building on the site, and between this PR and PP on the y-axis, you see the value of flexibility, this value of being able to wait. So when you invest, you need yields which are higher than the construction costs, but also not only higher than the construction costs, but higher than the construction costs plus the value of flexibility. Then it makes sense to invest, because also the value of flexibility, these are also costs. What does it mean? It means in the central regions of a city, or in the central regions of a region or something, of a state, it makes sense to invest. But in the peripheral regions, this is the right side of the picture here, you have higher building costs plus flexibility value, then you can earn yields. This means you make a loss from this point of view. Of course, you may say this is option theory. Who the hell knows option theory? But this is not the point, because when you're going on the market in order to buy fishes, you will see the woman who sells the fishes. Maybe she didn't join economic seminars, but nonetheless, she behaves according to supply and demand. Yeah? This is a sort of describing behavior. You don't have to know the theory in order to behave according to this theory. This is the point. Yeah? And this means this idle land, this is a waste. The city has to provide infrastructure, everything, and nothing happens. This is the so-called speculation. The speculation is not with a very high-priced region. It is with middle-priced region with an expectation that the prices will continue to rise. This is this point. And by the way, where this happens, these cities where this plays a big role, this value of flexibility, this value of being able to wait, these cities are smaller than they could be, and they are also more expensive than they could be. Yeah, and now I'm almost at the end. Some measures against speculations. I see only two measures which are really promising. And first, again, how to put it into the scheme of the bundle theory of property rights. Economic value. The owner of the land, he didn't make the value of the land. This was the community. So why the owner of the land should enjoy the economic value? Radically take it away. The owner of the land doesn't need it. Second thing, the control, the abusus right, it's already taken away to a high degree by public law. As I told you, when I'm living here in a quarter of residential houses, I'm not allowed to make a shooting range, and this is good so. Yeah? So it is already taken away. The only thing the investor needs, and which is important, is the right of use, the usus right. He must be sure if he invests something in a building that the stuff is not simply taken away by the state. This we have to guarantee, but not more, not all the rights. This is not necessary. So how can you do this? There are basically two possibilities. One possibility is the land value tax. This is what Henry George proposed. He said we can keep up even the private property in land by form, but we can hollow it out, take away the economic core of the property rights in land. We can decapitalize it. And the way of choice, this is land value tax, which should not be mixed up with a land value incremental tax. This is not the same. The land value incremental tax is, in my eyes, a very big problem. It was propagated by, for instance, by our social democrats in the last elections, but this is not a good way. The other point you can do it is public land banking. And this is what you are trying to do in Ghent. That the state or the municipality tries to get ownership in land, and he gives out the land not by selling it, but via ground leases, to lease it out. And maybe it's quite interesting for you that the city of Hamburg in Germany, I think it was 2 years ago, I also was in the Constitution Committee of Hamburg at that time. Hamburg is a state city. They now introduced a rule that Hamburg is not allowed to sell residential sites anymore. They only can rent it out via ground leases, and they have furthermore the obligation to each year they should make a positive land area balance. This means they should each year have more sites in their property, in their ownership, compared with the last year. And so piece by piece, increasing their share of ownership of land. I think this is a very interesting thing, and I wish Hamburg good success with that. And now I'm stopping because I'm already was too long. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Wow.
I see that it is a little bit difficult for you when you want to leave. No problem, but I propose that we can discuss briefly your introduction, and then after you have left, we can continue a discussion here in Dutch about the last part of the PowerPoint. So I propose that Robert has asked the word, and Frederick also. So go on, Robert.
I had a question about the speculation part. So sorry, I'm in a meeting.
Okay.
I thought speculation was also useful even in the periphery, and I would say, so if you imagine a city, the periphery is really big, and if you would start to invest everywhere at the same time in the periphery, most of these investments will be wasted, because not everybody can go live anywhere. So I think even in that case, the danger of overinvestment in the periphery is quite big. So I don't know if you can add a bit on this.
Yeah. First thing, you are completely right, but I see two things. If the state is the owner of the land, this doesn't mean necessarily that he puts building on everything immediately without the citizens having the need for new housing and so on. But it means that if there's the need, then the state maybe can react better than the market, because the market, maybe he says, we are waiting. Yeah? This is one thing. The second thing, I think I showed you two possibilities. In my view, we should combine this. I think it is a high complex procedure, for instance, to make the procurement for the land in public hand. Indeed, it is not a very good idea to give out the land, the public land, if it's in the hand of the municipality. By the way, the big drama is how to get the land into the hands of the municipality, but let's assume we have it already. Then the big issue is how you give it away, and it's not a very good idea to give it away for the highest bidder for several reasons. So it's also not good for affordable housing, because normally with such procurement system for the highest bid, you also don't meet a market price. This is the curse of the bidder, and the curse of the winner, the winner's curse, and several other things. This is but very complex. Normally in Germany we are doing, and this works very well, so-called conceptual tenders. This means the bidders don't bid only on the price, not only on the rent for leasing, but they also bid on the quality. They're looking who has the best concept, for instance, for handicapped people, for elder people, for the social mixture, and so on. All such thing, also ecology and so on, plays a role. This is valued. Also, the price plays a role, but not the only role. This is valued by a so-called jury, and then it is allotted to the best bidder, not to the highest bidder, but to the best bidder. However, such a procedure, which works very well, is very cost intensive and time consuming, and smaller cities cannot afford it. And for this reason, it makes sense, particularly for such lower value sites, which are in the periphery, in the cities, or also in countryside, in my eyes, to have a land value tax to decapitalize such sites, which with a tax which is much easier to implement. These key sites in the city center. For this, you really should have urgently public property in land and have such a allocation mechanism.
I'll add two things, interesting notes. Well, at least I think they're interesting. First is the winner's curse, because you seem to point to it a lot, but it's a curse for the winner, of course. It's not a curse for society. So in some way, it's the capitalist who loses because he offered too much money. I don't know if we need to be really afraid of the winner's curse, because it's the capitalist who loses. Of course, if he can't deliver on actually building the building, then it's a problem for us as well. But as long as this doesn't happen, it's not too important. And then on the speculation part, of course, that's why we have zoning and urban planning and so on, because we just remove or we at least decrease the uncertainty of the future. So I think planning is maybe already enough. Maybe we don't need to also socialize the land and determine fully what's going to happen with the land, as long as we give a direction to the developers, so they already know it's this area, this part of the periphery, which is going to be developed. So in the other areas, the owners can already know there's no development going to happen. So there's no need for speculation anymore in that sense, or to a lesser extent.
Yeah, but considering the last, it is not only about planning, it is also about the implementation of the planning. And in Dortmund, we have an Institute of Land Management, and the owner has said it in very good words. He said, the owners of land have to allow the plans, have to approve the plans, not from a legal point of view, but from a factual point of view. Because if the owner of the land are very reluctant, don't cooperate, they can make the life of the planners very difficult, and they can cross the plans. So this is the point. If they simply don't do, if all these guys do something different, it can be very difficult to implement the plans. And so I'm particularly a friend of land value tax, because the land value tax is also a soft, but it is a tool of making pressure on the landowners to do what the planner said. Because, for instance, if I have a site and if I make a plan, and in this plan it's written I have to use, or you can use half of the site for making the building. If I use only a quarter of the size for the building, they cannot make much. And there are other stuff. If they say, for instance, the building must be, the site must be, there must be set a building on it. Okay, then I make a very small building on it, a very cheap building, which is indeed also speculation. You always find some way to circumvent this stuff. And by the way, also, when you see there is a planned area, look at the agricultural sites. The agricultural sites, they are sometimes very expensive, at least in Germany, when you are getting close to a city. This is not because the quality of the soil gets higher. It is because there's the expectation that sooner or later, if there's pressure from migration or whatever, the population is growing, they have to convert the land. And so they are making speculation with the land because they're expecting they cannot keep up these plans. And the same you have inside the cities when they speculate that they have to increase the allowed heights of the building and so on and so on. So this means there is always some speculation, and if you let them know, if the plans are changed, you can earn more, but the money which you can earn more, we also taking away for sure, then you don't speculate anymore. And
I think so. The speculation you're talking about now is not socially harmful. So the fact that an agricultural lot has a high price doesn't change its use. Like, it's still used as agricultural land. Okay, these people are earning money without actually doing something, but there's no social harm in it. As in, there's no distortion or.
No, I see it different. Also, your first remark, I see it different. For instance, when you have high prices, agriculture, for instance, new farmers or so-called young farmers, they have no chance to enter the market. Because they cannot make so much money in order to buy the land, and also they are trying to increase the rent. If you want to be tenant, it is quite harmful, because then only if somebody can make it, then these are very big farmers, industrial farmers, and this is a harm. And by the way, also when you have winner's curse and some people are bidding on land and they are getting the ring, but they overestimated the price. This is not only their damage, it could also be the damage of the municipality. If you have a partner and later on the partner gets bankrupt, and then there's high insecurity, what is going on with the house, what will be with the tenants and so on, this can be quite harmful. Does the city have money to buy it in the future, and so on and so on and so on. The better is it is better to have a partner you can rely on. You are sharing the values, you're having the same ground of understanding. Then you have somebody who made a not solid calculation, and later on he finds he cannot keep his promises.
Yeah, so I think it's important we require the winner at least to have enough funds. Like, the winner always needs to be insured against going bankrupt. But once we have this as a premise, the winner can be cursed. It's not a problem anymore.
No, I really see there might be a problem. We had this sometimes in Germany, this problem at least, that municipality were selling to some guys and they looked very promising in the first glance. They offered a lot of money and they got big eyes, the responsibles in the city and so on. And later on they got bankrupt and the projects were empty. And
so they weren't, there wasn't enough collateral. So this is a problem. But
yeah.
once the collateral is there, it's a different issue. As long as they can't go bankrupt, because there's some insurance or there's enough capital behind the firm.
Against, they are not so silly. They will take a company with limited liability, and the strategy is always, if it works well, I reap the money. If it doesn't work well, then the community, they can clean the mess. This is always the concept. It is itself, it is an option. You can also evaluate companies with this real option approach. This is also such a thing.
Okay, thank you. Are there other people who want to intervene?
I think Frederick had us.
Excuse me, I have a question. You were mentioning in Hamburg that the municipality tries to increase their property, and that is even in the municipality law. How did this came to be? Because it's a very interesting example, and if you can show that Hamburg is successful in this endeavor, then maybe we, the people who want to communicate with Ghent City, we can show them this real factual realization which is happening in Hamburg.
Yeah.
So is there a mechanism which they used in to get there?
You mean politically? This is
Yeah.
quite young. It is too early to say how, whether and how successful it will be. We only can say, okay, they did it. Now we have to wait. The question of how they did it, it was also from civil society. Civil society made similar as you are doing in Ghent. They asked for a referendum to ask the people if they want to have such a new land policy, and people agreed they wanted to have such a new land policy. And then the government of Hamburg, according to the law of the city-state, they had to follow and they had to implement this new policy. So far, it only works for residential land. It doesn't work for commercial land, but it is something.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Are there other people who want to intervene? Frederick, you had.
Yeah. So in one of the last slides about bundle theory of property rights, there were 3 things crossed, and the only thing left was rights of use. Is this only about land, or is it also about, let's say, apartment buildings? Or,
No, this is particularly about land.
Yeah.
For the apartment, for the buildings, it is different, because when you're making leasehold rights, I don't know the legal situation in Belgium, but according to the German legal situation and also English and so on, you have, considering the building, you almost have the same rights as a full owner, almost. You have several restrictions considering the land, because you are also using the land of the landowner, so you can't do everything with the land, and you also can't change the purpose of the building without asking the landowner. But basically, you have full rights. You can rent it out. You also can sell the ground lease and so on. This jus abutendi you also have. And if you make some profit because you maintained your building very well and so on, it's also yours. So basically, you have the same rights. You also can take a loan and everything. You have almost the same rights as a normal landowner for the building, but not for the land itself.
And let's say abolishing the fact that you can buy land in the city, what would be the effect on the affordability of housing?
This is a very interesting question. This depends very much on how you are making the leasehold agreement. Let me first give you an example. There's the city of Singapore, you know it. And the city of Singapore owns about 90% of the land. This is considered as being one of the most capitalist countries of the whole world, Singapore, but owns about 90% of the whole land of the city, and they have a property rate of also almost 90%. In Germany, we have less than 50% property rate. I don't know what is the property rate in Belgium. It's probably a little bit higher. But in In Singapore, it's almost 90%. Why is that? If 90% of the state of the land belongs to the state, it is because they have also such a leasehold system, which is similar to the a leasehold system, which is similar to our system, but not exactly the same. But the point is, they have made it that in one of the most expensive cities of the world, in which not everything is shining, of course, but in one of the most expensive cities of the world, they made housing, at least for the Singaporeans, affordable. And they had a high rate of housing property, but with leasing conditions.
Yeah.
And for instance, when you're looking what is the most important asset in the economy, it is by far the real estate. And also, where is the imbalance of wealth the highest? It is real estate. And here, this is a very good lever to make another wealth policy, another distribution policy, and also to make another to make housing affordable. Of course, in Singapore, this is so far a poor example because the not Singaporeans, the guest workers, they live sometimes in very poor conditions, of course. But what they did for the Singaporeans, for their own citizens, was very good, and there you could have a look. Another thing I want to mention, these ground leases, they have a very high potential. Why? I don't know if somebody of yours is economist, but when normal property, you have one owner, and you're making ground leases, you have two persons involved. One person who owns the building, one person who owns the land. If you have two persons, you can always exchange the so-called comparative advantages. Some have advantages in order to acquire money. For instance, municipalities, at least in Germany, they can get loans for very good conditions, for much better conditions than the private persons can take. The private persons, in contrast, they can take some risks. If you take these two guys together, you can also create advantage, which is higher, which is potentially higher than ground leases. This is made use of already in some commercial leasehold models. Let me give you an example. In Frankfurt, there's a investment company which is only specialized in ground leases. What are they doing? They're taking the money from insurance company. This is money with very low interest rate. And then they are asking some companies, for instance, German Telecom or something, you have a skyscraper on your own land. What about if you sell us the land, you keep your skyscraper, and we rent you back the land? And then, of course, the telecom will say, why shall we do that? We are happy with our full property. Why shall we sell you our land? And then they say, yeah, because we pay you the double of the price of the value of the land. And then they calculate and they find, wow, this is a very interesting investment. But why they can offer the double price for the land? Simply because the risk situation is a very different as with full property. They know that the risk for failure of a lessee is very, very, very low. And if he fails, you find quickly another who steps in. This means if the location is good, you have a very low risk. And if you have a very low risk, you also can take a very low profitability rate. This means they expect a cash flow, but they can pay a lot of money from the cash flows. They give the cash flow to the insurance companies, and everybody is happy. So I'm always asking, why don't municipalities make such a model, but not under the aspect of profit maximizing, but giving the advantage to the tenants and making housing affordable?
Wow.
And also the CEO of this company, he had the same idea. So let's go to the municipalities and tell them they can make the leasing contracts differently. But the point was they didn't understand. They said, we always did it like that. Since 100 years we are doing like that. We keep doing like that. But this is not an argument. This is simply bullshit. So these big advantages, the leasehold could have, and which makes for this company, which makes, for instance, the telecom voluntarily give up their property in land and change into the position of lessee. They don't use this stuff. They make the leasehold in a way that has been already made 100 years ago, and this is sometimes very unattractive for the investors, and which also doesn't create such added value which you could give to the tenants, and this is a pity.
Robert has asked to speak.
I just wanted to add something to Friedrich's question. So there's the distribution part, which is interesting, but I think there's also just an economic efficiency argument. So the moment you have the ground leases or you have a land value tax, your city already has an income. So it doesn't need to tax property, for example. So if the city would get rid in Ghent of the KI, the onroerende voorheffing, it's just a housing cost which disappears. So at the moment, if you want to build a house, you need to pay income tax on the income of the laborers who built the house. If this tax disappears, building housing becomes cheaper. So you don't. It's not only the distribution; it's also it's a more efficient way for governments to get money out of the economy.
Exactly. This is what Mason Gaffney, this American economist, always said. This Mason Gaffney, he is dead since several years. He left from office in the age of 92 and then died in the age of 94, 2023. But this was exactly what he said. He said this land value tax is a way of reconciliating efficiency and justice. Normally you say always these are two things which are contrast, opponents. But with land value tax, you can reconciliate, you can bring them in a line. I think this is also a very good point.
Wow.
Is there another person who want to intervene? Otherwise, thank you very much for this proposition about what you said about leasing. Do you think that what we have discussed in the beginning, the public obligation, so the municipality obligation can have a role? Because, as I said yesterday, the city has announced that they want to discuss this possibility to edit a city obligation. Can that stay alone? Because Belgium, the property rate is here 75%, in Ghent 50%. And the discussion here is the debt. In fact, we think that really Belgium and Ghent, fundamentally, the fundamentals are okay. the capital of the fortune of the Belgians, the debt of Belgium, the BNP of Belgium is the same. In fact, there is no fundamental risk of financial default in theory, of course. In practical, political sense, of course, the thing that is used is Ghent can be, Belgium can be bankrupt. There are speculation on the obligations of Belgium, and in Ghent the same. We have a snowball of rent. We have to smash. So, do you think that your proposition about leasing can be linked on sustainable local project municipality obligations oriented to affordable housing investment?
Yeah, basically, yes. It certainly also depends on the, how to say, on the trust of the investors in the solvency of the city. Because the better the trust is, the lower the interest rate will be, and the easier it is to cover it from the ground leases, because you can't make the ground leases too high if you also want to pursue some social or ecological purposes. So it is very important that the city keeps a good rating. If the rating is okay, I can't judge it. This is feasible. And I don't know what's the situation in Belgium. In Germany, the cities have to make balance sheets also. Yeah, also. But this is, in a certain way, it is nasty, but it's also a chance, because the value of the land will increase in the course of the time. It will increase. According to the German accounting standards, you don't see it in the balance sheet because it's a so-called hidden reserve. But you can make a law, for instance, also you can make it voluntarily, that you say, okay, we make these hidden reserves open and we show how much substance